Hey guys, welcome to the Liberal Hive Mind, a channel solely focused on exposing the abundant hypocrisy of the left. Holy bombshell, folks. Do I have a big story for you guys from The Intercept? We all remember Joe Biden's Ministry of Truth, his disinformation board, headed by his disinformation czar. I forget her name, let me Google it really quick. Oh yes, Nina Jankowicz. We remember the disaster of Joe Biden's disinformation board. It was such a deeply controversial, unpopular move that the Biden administration supposedly axed the project a couple weeks later. Well, it seems as though you may have been duped. The DHS did technically dissolve the board and technically remove Nina Jankowicz from her position, but it seems as though that may have just been a PR move to conveniently use Nina Jankowicz to throw her under the bus to make it seem as if they were scrapping the project, but really, behind the scenes, they kept it going. And we now have a massive bombshell piece from The Intercept that shows that the DHS never actually stopped this project, and Joe Biden's Ministry of Truth project is still very much within the works. Let me show you guys what's going on here with some incredible reporting from The Intercept. We've got some stuff to get into, so let's roll the tape. Alright folks, take a look at this. Truth Cops leaked documents outline DHS's plan to police disinformation. The Department of Homeland Security is quietly broadening its efforts to curb speech it considers dangerous. An investigation by The Intercept has found years of internal DHS memos, emails, and documents obtained via leaks and ongoing lawsuits, as well as public documents, illustrate an expansive effort by the agency to influence tech platforms. The work, much of which remains unknown to the American public, came into clearer view earlier this year when the DHS announced a new disinformation governance board, a panel designed to police misinformation, quote, false information spread unintentionally, disinformation, false information spread intentionally, and malinformation, factual information shared, typically out of context with harmful intent, that allegedly threatens U.S. interests. While the board was widely ridiculed, immediately scaled back, and then shut down within a few months, other initiatives are underway as DHS pivots to monitoring social media now that its original mandate, the war on terror, has been wound down. Behind closed doors and through pressure on private platforms, the US government has its power to shape online discourse, according to meeting minutes and other records appended to a lawsuit filed by Missouri Attorney General Eric Schmidt, a Republican who is also running for Senate. Discussions have ranged from the scale and scope of government intervention in online discourse to the mechanics of streamlining takedown requests for false or intentionally misleading information. Platforms have got to get comfortable with government. It's really interesting how hesitant they remain. Microsoft executive Matt Masterson, a former DHS official, texted Jen Easterly, a DHS director, in February. In a March meeting, Laura Demlow, an FBI official, warned that the threat of subversive information on social media could undermine support for the US government. Demlow, according to the notes of the discussion, attended by senior executives from Twitter, JPMorgan Chase, stressed that, quote, we need media infrastructure that is held accountable. Everything seems to be coming full circle. Remember Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton were doing an anti-disinformation media tour with multiple events popping up across the country, warning about the threat of online misinformation and advocating for more government intervention and government powers to police speech online. And then a couple weeks later, Joe Biden launches his disinformation board. It seems to be all connected, folks. The feds want to take control of the internet. They want to control the narrative, and they're using national interests and national security as an excuse. I mean, if it really was just to combat the Russians and combat terrorist groups that want to do you harm, that'd be one thing. But of course, considering what we know about the history of the federal government, it never really stops there now, does it? The language and the terminology that they use is purposely vague. What it really is another excuse to tap into all of the data that social media companies are collecting on you in order to expand the domestic spy network that they've already started in the early 2000s. That's what's really going on here, and there also seems to be a political motivation here, which, surprise, surprise, surprise to absolutely no one, always seems to benefit the Democrat Party and Democrat establishment. The big takeaway from all of the leaks that we're seeing so far is the connection between social media giants and the federal government. We have a leaked text message here between the Department of Homeland Security and Microsoft. This is the text message that contains the quote that I read earlier in the article. Thanks so much, really appreciate it, and sorry I didn't ring last week. Think you were on the call this week. just trying to get us in a place where the federal government can work with platforms to better understand the mis/dis trends, so relevant agencies can try to pre-bunk/debunk as useful. Not our mission, but was looking to play a coordination role, so not every D/A is independently reaching out to platforms, which could cause a lot of chaos. Was on the call, the coordination is greatly appreciated. Was disappointed that platforms including us didn't offer more, we'll get there. And sector leadership had zero questions. We'll get there, and that kind of leadership really helps. Platforms have got to get more comfortable with the government. It's really interesting how hesitant they remain, again, Microsoft included. And so what this exposes is that the federal government is having active calls with tech oligarchs in Silicon Valley and all the big tech companies, and they're working together to, quote, fight mis- and disinformation trends and pre-bunk/debunk as useful. Folks, it always goes back to the same story over and over again. This is how you know they cannot be trusted. And this whole thing is blowing up, and it shows just how deeply connected the tech companies and the federal government really are behind the scenes when it comes to the censorship trends. It always comes back to the Hunter Biden laptop story. Mark Zuckerberg on Joe Rogan's podcast a couple months ago gave us the first glimpse. Federal agencies worked with Silicon Valley tech giants in the 2020 election to pre-bunk and debunk as was useful to them to undermine the electoral process in the 2020 election. They worked together, they colluded together to the benefit of the Democrat establishment and Puppet Joe. They claim that it's in the US's national security interest, when really it was in the deep state Democrat establishment electoral interest. We're seeing reports that these massive tech platforms are meeting with federal agents and federal agencies on a constant basis throughout the year. And the question is, really, how deep does the rabbit hole go? Over the last 2 years, coincidentally, after Donald Trump was banned, and every single massive tech company instilled the same misinformation policies of what you can and what you can't say on those platforms, all at the same time, the question is, how involved was the federal government behind those decisions? In other words, there's a possibility that the federal government is using tech companies as proxies to control political speech online, all in the benefit of mainstream media narratives, all in the benefit of Democrat political narratives and talking points. There is seemingly a massive conspiracy here involving the federal government as a key player behind all of the censorship that we have seen, all of the big tech censorship moves over the last couple of years. That is a massive, massive bombshell, and surprise to absolutely no one, the only group that's reporting on it is The Intercept. Nothing from mainstream media sources. This is once again one of the biggest scandals, one of the biggest stories currently bouncing around, and you have to look for it to find it. You have to be within a specific circle that's following this type of stuff to even be aware of it. I mean, it's just truly stunning. And what's the scariest part? You know, we talk a whole lot about Joe Biden politicizing the FBI, the DHS, and the DOJ, and the CIA, of course, but it seems as though these agencies were politicized and rogue actors working for Democrat interest, of course, even when Donald Trump was in office. The Hunter Biden laptop story is the biggest example. It's not just the media bias and social media bias, it's also the federal government. Outside of the office of the presidency and Congress, there is a massive authoritarian shadow regime that is working to control information, control speech, and control narratives during election cycles. And then they go on the news every single night over and over again talking about democracy. Does that sound like a genuine democracy to you? Let me ask you that. The answer is unequivocally no, it does not. The corruption is much deeper than most people understand. They call Donald Trump a conspiracy theorist for talking about the deep state, but it's no conspiracy, folks. It's right here in front of your very eyes. That's what I got for you guys, though. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to leave a like and possibly subscribe to the channel. I'm gonna get out of here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.